So Khalid just got outed as gay by somebody, and he took that as an opportunity to say, yeah, it sucks that I got outed, that person sucks, but I am gay, and that is something that's part of me. He took this invasion into his privacy as an opportunity to own his sexuality, and that's a very brave thing to do, and we should be very proud of him. Here's what we do when someone tells us that they are outed. I'm sorry that happened to you, that sucks. When someone comes out to us as gay, we say, thank you for telling me, I'm proud of you, and I accept you. Here's what we don't do, even if it's a celebrity. We don't say, yeah, I knew that already. Duh. The closet, it's glass. You were obviously gay the whole time. Those are the only comments I'm seeing in response to Khalid coming out. The only thing you guys have to say is, yeah, I already knew he was gay. Wasn't that already a known fact? Your perception of their sexuality does not matter in this moment. And you saying, duh, I already knew that, is invalidating of them going through a difficult experience. If somebody has spent a majority of their life hiding a very important part of themselves because of fear, don't make it about you. There's a difference in saying, yeah, I maybe suspected that and I support you, that's okay, and saying, yeah, duh, we all already knew you were gay. That's just blowing him off when he's trying to do the courageous act of telling us who he is. And I understand that Khalid is a celebrity and he's not friends with the people in these comment sections. They're not talking directly to him, but there are thousands of these comments. It's 10 to 1 people saying, I already knew you were gay, duh. So I'm sure he's seeing the message, and it's just kind of icky behavior in general. Just kind of weird. Maybe cut it out.
Here's the thing. In order to discuss Luke Dunphy, I first have to discuss all of the children in the Dunphy household, because a lot of people try to bring up which Dunphy kid they think is the most neglected, and there are two things that I have to say. One, all of the Dunphy kids are neglected. Two, all of the Modern Family kids in general, including Manny, are neglected in some way, shape, or form. Manny seems the most loved because Gloria is so obsessed with him. But because Gloria is so obsessed with him, he is actually neglected in an entirely different way. Where A, he's neglected by his dad, but B, he's neglected by the writers in the concept of character growth. But in order to discuss the Dunphy children, and therefore to discuss Luke Dunphy, we have to discuss the fact that Haley and Alex are also neglected. Each of these kids is neglected in their own way, shape, or form. So when we see Luke in his birthday episode, and the only thing that he's really asking for, because his birthday is right next to Thanksgiving, so it's forgotten like every year, or just kind of packed into Thanksgiving, and he's like, I guess the only thing I really need is, like, a belt. And his parents are like, a belt? Dream bigger, kiddo. And he's like, yeah, no, you're right, because the extension cord I'm using right now works fine. And then his parents realize exactly how much they've been ignoring him. That becomes Luke's episode of not being ignored for 30 seconds. But by not ignoring him for 30 seconds, they're not actually showing any more time being spent with Luke. It's all about throwing the party for Luke, which I would characterize as another form of neglect, because they're trying to show their actions instead of, like, they're trying to prove through their actions that they care about this kid, but the actions are all monetary or like full of competition between Claire and Phil on who loves their kid more, or whose kid, like what kids will enjoy things more in this episode. And Claire is just trying to have something where the kids will enjoy it that she enjoyed as a little kid, that I think if she hadn't been pushing it that hard, probably would have been very well enjoyed by these kids, because art and craft sections in birthday parties are always really enjoyed. But Phil mocks her, is spending a ton of money on this entire party, and that while spending all this money and mocking his wife, isn't actually spending any time with his kid. And Claire, who's trying to throw this piece of the party, is also not spending any time with Luke. And that is how we see each of the Dunphy kids. The parents are constantly trying to prove how much they love one kid over the other, or all the kids the same, and because of that, they're all neglected in their own way. So Claire is constantly trying to beat on Haley about being a better person, about like growing, about making sure that she's not spending all of her time with Dylan, about doing better in school. But all the while, she's also missing a lot of key factors of Haley's life, which is how Haley's willing and able to get away with so much. And also, it's how we see Alex constantly succeeding and constantly striving and just doing the best that she can. Her best is the best. This girl is brilliant. This girl is amazing. And Alex never gets to have her awards really celebrated because Claire is trying to find a way to make the other two kids feel special, because she knows that the other two kids feel dumb. And It's one of my least favorite factors of the show. It's also something that I think happens a lot in most TV shows that are like family-based TV shows that have kids in them. Because when you have kids in family-based TV shows, you aren't actually trying to use these kids to their full advantage. You're using them for a joke to usually be the butt of the joke or the instigator of the joke or just a piece of the joke that you can kind of play with and toy with, because kids do and say the darndest things. And that can be seen in a lot of TV shows. And when people bring up Full House, which I know that they're going to say, oh, well, those kids weren't neglected. What do you have to say about that? And that was a family TV show from the 90s, and it was specifically supposed to be a family-friendly TV show for everyone, but it was more written towards and for children than it ever was for adults, which is why Danny Tanner never said any of the absolutely horrendous things that Bob Saget would have said. Because if that show even came out like 2001, it would have been a completely different concept. Like 10 years later, it would have been a completely different concept of what jokes would be in and why those jokes would be in. But the 1990s family sitcom style was so family friendly and family forward and family first that you actually get to see these stories with kids who are actually really loved and actually really looked after, because the stories are all, especially but not limited to, in Boy Meets World and in Family Matters and in Step by Step, they're kid driven with adults in the background. So in family sitcoms now, especially Modern Family, we have these sitcoms that have kids and have adults, but they're adult focused and the kids are in the background. But in the 90s, these shows were kid focused, so the kids had the major storylines. The kids were the ones who were learning. The kids who were the ones who were growing. And while these kids were growing and learning and becoming people, the adults were also learning how to become people based off of their kids' actions and based on how they would have to learn how to parent their kids. But that's not what we get in Modern Family. And I know that this was supposed to be a video on Luke Dunphy, but this is more of a preface to discuss Luke Dunphy, because to be able to discuss Luke Dunphy, I had to be able to bring up all the rest of these factors so that in my next video, I can more properly discuss why Luke Dunphy is the way that he is and why his character as the youngest of the Dunphy children is so intensely interesting. Because yeah, we see him being neglected as a kid, and then as he gets older, Phil is like very attached to this kid for some intents and some purposes, but not all of them. He wants to mold Luke into Phil 2.0, if not a better Phil. But if Luke becomes better than Phil at anything, then Phil gets jealous and mad at his son. And meanwhile, Luke sees his mother as his hero and his mother as like the person in his life that he like most relies on and most respects. But he has to be really careful of that and wary of that, because anytime that he praises Claire over Phil, Phil gets jealous and Claire has to fix the entire problem for Luke. So even when those situations happen, Luke is going to Claire. And you could call Claire a boy mom because she's so in love with Luke and loves him so much, but also, my nose is stuffy, but also at the same time, if Claire didn't have Phil in the picture, like everything I'm pointing at, like is like Claire trying to compete against Phil, Claire trying to like prove something to Phil, Claire trying to like handle his household with Phil messing with everything. If it had just been Claire in this household and in this parentage, even if she were working that entire time instead of getting the job at Jay's later on, we would have been able to see a much more stable household, because so many of these issues aren't that Claire is actively trying to ignore and avoid her kids and like only make them happy when she thinks that she has to. It's Claire trying to keep Phil in the picture as well. And I have more I could say in this essay. I will. There's so much more. I have started a YouTube series where I'm just rewatching all of Modern Family, and I'm only on episode 1 right now, finished, posted, it's up there, but the first season is the season that has the Luke birthday party episode, and that's going to be, it's one of my favorite storytelling pieces of the entire show. But B, it will be really interesting to get to watch that live and tell people all of my thoughts on this. Okay, thank you. Bye.
I am a Mrs. Everdeen defender. I love Katniss's mom, and one of the main things I'm excited for in the next Hunger Games book is getting a better glimpse into her life. Katniss's mom is swept under the rug a lot as a character, and she also gets a lot of hate from the fandom. And I'm not coming on here to say that that is not 100% valid, but one of the main reasons why I'm such a die-hard defender of her is because of a point one of my mutuals, Rosa Overanalyzes, made a while back, and it's that Katniss, our narrator and protagonist, forgives her. And who would we be as readers of her personal experience to tell her that that's not allowed to happen? Even before the rising action of the first story begins, Katniss expresses that she is trying to better understand her mom and find some kind of common ground with her, because the older she gets, the more she realizes just how few resources her mom actually had to deal with all the problems she faced when her dad died. And this is someone who saw her best friend go into the arena and die, and then saw the love of her life go to work in the mines and die. And then she saw her youngest daughter get reaped for the Hunger Games to go die. And then she watched her oldest daughter volunteer in her place. And then she was unwillingly thrust into the public eye because her daughter was a victor in the face of a rebellion. And then she saw her district get firebombed. And she probably had intense survivor's guilt because while she may have been living in the seam, she was from the merchant part of the district, and none of those people made it out alive. And then she sees Katniss getting shot, Katniss almost getting murdered by Peeta, Katniss going to war, and then her youngest daughter dies. I'm a Mrs. Everdeen defender. And this isn't me saying that she is the mother of the year, and this isn't me saying that Katniss and Prim were not deeply failed as children. But Katniss's mom was also systemically oppressed. And the older Katniss got, the more she understood that, because the more of her mom she saw in herself. So I really hope we get a better look at what her life was like as a teenager so that we can compare and contrast her and Katniss a little bit more. What are our plans for being as insufferable as humanly possible this holiday season? Because personally, I'm gonna accuse my evangelical grandmother of witchcraft every time I see her Christmas tree. Whenever I watch a really popular movie, I end up going on a rabbit hole of the actors who played roles that aren't talked about very much. Because I watched The Substance, and a lot of people have been asking, who was she talking to on the phone? I haven't heard anybody talking about who played him. I went to The Substance IMDb. I got all the way to the bottom of the page before finding out he was voiced by Jan Bean. And I found that he has less than 2,000 followers on Instagram. I don't know, I just find it so interesting when millions of people have heard this person's voice, have been analyzing the mystery behind it. Still, very few people know who even played him. And then I found an article on Cinema Blend about the casting process to find him. And they went through this super arduous casting process to even find him because they wanted the voice that you heard on the phone to be perfect and the devil and super sinister, but also tempting and enticing. And it was this really pivotal decision that set the whole tone for the movie and made it what it was. And it's easy to forget that behind all of these faceless, nameless characters, there are real human people behind them. They oftentimes don't really get their flowers. Being said, Jan Bean, I hope you see this and know that your performance in The Substance is deeply appreciated. Good job.
Black girls on social media everywhere are trying to tell y'all that they are trying to erase diversity from Hollywood, and nobody wants to listen because nobody wants to listen when it comes to black girls, and nobody wants to listen because it's happening to black girls first. There are barely any monoracial black girls put in TV shows. The popular TV shows that we have now don't have monoracial girls. I have no problem with biracial people getting representation, but the people that are getting cast are biracial people. And even in some of my favorite shows, the biracial people are getting casted as if they were monoracial. One of my favorite shows that came out last year is Gen V. Jocelyn Claire is biracial. She has 2 black parents. But guess what? It's not just happening to black girls. They're doing it to us first, and then they're gonna hit other races next. Nobody ever cares when it starts with black women or black girls or black people, but then it starts hitting other races, and suddenly everybody wants to care when we've been sitting here and telling y'all and screaming. So I am telling y'all right now, they are trying to erase people of color from media, because guess what? In the same show Gen V, there is a character who has both genders, male and female, right? They are both half Asian, half white. Guess what? They have 2 Asian parents. So not only is one character in this show biracial playing a monoracial character, but it's 2 characters in this show, 2 characters. And I love both the characters. One of my favorite ships in the show, but it's not something that's going unnoticed by me. When you look at the casting that's in TV shows right now, or the shows that are coming up, or the movies that are coming up, you're starting to notice that less and less dark-skinned black girls are getting casted. Less and less monoracial girls are getting casted. They're gonna cast a biracial girl. Like, look at Outer Banks. Key was the only character in the only like black girl representation in season 1. She was biracial, and then they added in a black girl for the second season. And if you don't care about diversity, then this conversation isn't for you, okay? If you want all of your media to be white, but that's not what America looks like. I'm sorry. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I do understand why they don't want us, like, in their media and stuff like that, but that's not what America looks like. Black people have been here for a very long time, unfortunately. So it does not mean that we need to be erased from media, because we belong here just as much as the other people, just as much as our counterparts, okay? But anyways, this is not me being on some conspiracy theorist type of shit. This is not me being like cuckoo or whatever. No. In our faces, they're erasing black girls from media. And once they successfully erase us, what do you think they're going to do with other people? The same thing, the same way they put us in the media. They started with black girls, and then they moved on to other races, and then shows start to get more diverse. And if they take away, like, people of color, what do you think they're going to do with queer characters? There are barely queer characters in media now. If they take away people of color, they're going to come for queer characters next, and then characters with disabilities and other things. Like, I don't understand how y'all don't see how this correlates, because you only care about yourself, but there's a bigger picture out here, and they're trying to erase us from media.
For the past few months, I have been harassed, absolutely harassed by people in my DMs asking me, demanding me, interrogating me as to why I follow Donald Trump. And honestly, I found this to be so ridiculous that it didn't even deserve my attention nor my defense. But I feel like the amount of people who have been harassing me at this point speaks to a larger issue, which is that I sincerely believe that liberals are in a fucking cult, okay? This is cult-like mentality. And it is the entrapment of one's mind where you are not allowing someone to see all sides of the spectrum because you think that we share certain values and we shouldn't be giving any attention to this. I think that it's one of the greatest disservices you can do for yourself and for your community. Now, for a lot of you who are new to following me, I am a person who went to school for journalism. I am a writer. I am a filmmaker. I am a researcher. It is my journalistic responsibility to understand all sides of the spectrum. And I want to say that it's also my responsibility as an American citizen to always understand all sides of the spectrum. Does this make me a Trump supporter? No. But when I went to Palestine, I didn't just live with Palestinians and interview Palestinians. It was imperative for me. It was necessary for me to also give that same attention to Israelis. So I lived with Israelis. I interviewed Israelis. Not because I suddenly empathized or something, but because for me to truly understand what was happening in Palestine, to truly understand the occupation of Palestine, to truly understand how we got to the genocide of Palestinians, I needed to see all sides of the spectrum. And not only can I understand this from a emotional level, I can speak to this from a very factual level, okay? And I think that this is really important. And I feel like a lot of people are unable to do this because this is how living in America has taught us. Okay, the U.S. media does a really good job at indoctrinating all of us. And the U.S. media is very liberal. And it's one of the main reasons why I started following Donald Trump, because I realized that most of the news outlets were no longer reporting on his campaign. They were trying to make it seem almost like he was irrelevant for months, or like actually for the last 2 years. He was barely on CNN or MSNBC. And I remember thinking to myself, like, let me go follow him and check to see what he's saying. Because I knew what they were trying to do was deter people from listening to what he had to say and be enamored by him, because that is what they did in 2016. They were constantly reporting his campaign, and it actually got him to be very popular. But this time they thought that if they didn't report on him, people would just think that he was a non-motherfucking factor and not vote for him. But actually what that did was people wanted to know, wait, why isn't the media reporting on Donald Trump? Let me go follow him. And then they were, again, enamored by him, and they ended up voting for him. This is one of the most influential people of our times. And I think that if you cannot handle listening to someone who is going to be the leader of this nation, I think you need to investigate why. And I think that if you're at that space of like, you're following Donald Trump, I'm unfollowing you. Please, go right ahead and unfollow me. But I just think that mindset is so elementary. It's very elementary. Like, your thought processes actually have to evolve. Like, you're mad at me for following someone who is going to be the leader of this nation. And people were like, oh, why don't you then follow Biden or Kamala? Like, because the US media is already so liberal. If I wanted to know what they were saying, I wouldn't have to go very far to find it, because every U.S. media station, news outlet was constantly showing us what they were saying and what they were doing. They are the administration in charge right now. So I say all of this to say that I think it's really important that people allow for themselves to see all sides of a spectrum to truly understand what is going on. And even when we think about Israel and Palestine, like, the main reason people were so pro-Israel for so long was because the U.S. media and the U.S. government were never giving the mic to the Palestinian resistance. They were never showing you the Palestinian side. They were constantly showing you the Israeli side, and they're constantly still showing only the Israeli side. It is imperative that we are constantly looking to see all sides of the spectrum to truly understand what is happening. And that doesn't mean that you always have to empathize, but hey, you might learn something. And I think that people think that I already know Donald Trump. I already know what he's going to say. I don't want to follow him. Like, you don't know everything. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. Actually, the older I get, I'm humbled to realize that I don't know everything. And learning, I'm always up for learning more. Some of my favorite journalists, some of the greatest academics also follow Donald Trump, and they're all liberals as well. Stop doing yourself a disservice by bullying people who are just regular people. Really. Some of you are out here constantly pointing fingers at people who are just trying to get by, who work 9-to-5 jobs, who are trying to at least trying to make a difference. And I am not your fucking enemy. Please, I am not your enemy. But if you feel like you need to unfollow me, please go ahead. I would rather have 100 followers who truly understand me than 1 million followers who don't really know me at all. So a few days ago, the United States of America vetoed a UN resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. This is the 4th time that the Biden administration vetoed a UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. We are more than a year into this genocide, and this current administration is still using its power to veto any resolution to stop the genocide in Gaza. And I think it goes to show that, one, the Democratic Party was never serious about actually ending the genocide in Gaza. So when AOC said that, Biden and Kamala are working endlessly to get a ceasefire deal, that was absolute bullshit. The amount of people we have seen at this point that are being murdered, ruthlessly murdered, the amount of children, that carnage has not ended. This genocide is raging on just as much as it had last year. No politician gives a shit about Gaza. But one thing that I cannot stop thinking about is that when you think about how small of a country Palestine is, and how all of these countries are involved in deciding whether or not a genocide should stop or continue, I think about how would this genocide have ended? Would it have even gotten to this point if we had just allowed Palestine and Israel to figure it out without
the entire United Nations getting involved, without the US and the UK backing Israel, without the amount of money and weapons that are going to Israel. What would have happened if Israel and Palestine were just left to themselves to figure out how they can come to a resolution? I was thinking about this because a couple weeks ago, I saw this video of this woman who posted a video of this like bear trying to get into her house. And this was like one of the skinniest bears I have ever seen. And the bear had fingers and stuff. And there was a comment that said like, whatever you do, don't feed the bear, because this was a baby cub that has just been released from its mama bear. And like the worst thing, the bear can eat the grass. And I thought about how interesting that was. And she said, like, you know, a fed bear is a dead bear. But I thought how fascinating it was that, like, everything in nature is moving very organically and it doesn't need human intervention. And I think that that translates into, like, our interpersonal relationships as human beings to each other, because we are constantly trying to impose our belief systems and our ideologies onto each other. Like, that is the basis of colonization, where colonizers came to the global south and saw how people in the global south were living and thought how uncivilized it was, and felt the need to impose their ideologies onto other people. And that caused so much human suffering, that caused so much carnage, that caused so much war and genocide and starvation and enslavement of billions of people. I say all of this to say that if we allowed Israel and Palestine to kind of resolve their issues without, you know, all of these countries getting involved, without the UN, without the US, without the UK, without the constant money that's going to Israel, without the constant weapons and fighter jets and now soldiers that are going to support Israel, I literally feel like Palestinians would have not only won, but they would have come to a resolution. But there's been so much human intervention when it came to Israel and Palestine. When you think about it, this country is so small that the fact that it requires the entire world to get involved is actually crazy. And I think this is what makes it so spiritual. I mean, it is spiritual when you think about how every Abrahamic religion believes that this Messiah or Jesus or somebody's going to come back to this land. And like all, like the world will end, or there will be a new beginning, or whatever it is. But this land is very spiritual. But when you think about this in like kind of zoom out and you see it for what it is, it's like all of this is spiritual. We are imposing on nature to organically resolve so many of our problems, so many of the issues, and it's because we don't trust nature. And we don't trust nature because we're so disconnected to nature. And that in itself is very spiritual.
Okay, I'm going to tread lightly with all my statements since everything I say gets misconstrued. Okay, I understand the sentiment of Black Americans feeling like people don't give a fuck about us post-election. I understand that sentiment, especially given the support that we've given to other movements. However, no, I am going to be blunt. Going as far to be like, fuck you guys, fuck your movement to Palestinian people is crazy. Sorry, that's fucking crazy. You cannot like take the words of maybe one Palestinian person who missed the mark and apply that to everybody. There are lamos everywhere. There are losers everywhere. Every group got a lamo. Every group got a loser. Like, I'm trying to say it in the chillest way possible. It's like, imagine if someone was like, this is the opinion of Black Americans, and they chose Candace Owens. Like, do you see why we can't? I know it's a stressful time. At the same time, the people who will feel the weight of this election the most are our communities of color, lower income people. Again, contrary to popular internet belief, I don't know politics like that. I mean, I know enough to get by, but I do actively try to learn more. And especially right now, I've only been able to vote in 2 elections, so kind of all I've known is trying to prevent Donald Trump from becoming the president. That's kind of all I've known. And so I'm trying to look into what other people are saying in terms of people who have actual ideas, because there are a lot of people who get on here and go, this person sucks because this person sucks because this person sucks because this person sucks because, and then I go, okay, what do we do? No answer. Not a nothing. There is a lot of like, we can't do with no plan, and no plan to deal with the consequences of what was being said before. I think it's important to listen to other people, and even people who don't necessarily agree with you. Not fascists. Don't listen to those people. So I do want to make it clear that what I'm about to say comes from my understanding of sociology and not politics. I want that to be clear. And as are most of my statements ever. Because I know if someone were to ask me, like, oh, how do we fix this? What do we do about this? I would answer, I don't know. Because I don't know. But what I do know is that power structures always look like this. They always look like this. There's always less people up here than there are over here. And what I also know is that the dream of the people up here is for all of us to stop giving a fuck about each other. And that's a very dangerous road to go down. I'm not personally of the opinion that advocating for people should be transactional, because that feels like treating people as a means to an end. I just don't think that people should ever be that in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that we should sacrifice people to obtain this certain goal. I don't think that we should let people suffer because, well, maybe then it'll be bad enough for whatever. I want it to be crystal clear. Once again, I am not telling you how to think. I'm just telling you what I think right now as a 22-year-old. Maybe that'll be what I think tomorrow. Maybe I'll learn something else and change my mind. And we're all allowed to do that. That is a regular thing. That's how we should go through life. So again, I'm not saying that I don't understand some people's frustrations, and some people are voicing them correctly. Some people, you're crashing out. Too far, we're crashing out. And again, the people who are crashing out, not representative of all Black Americans. Again, there's lamos everywhere, guys. I think it's important to think about people's statements in the context in which they occur, because it's hard to, if your house is on fire, hard to see out the window. They're like, we also got to worry about what's going on down the street. Hard to do that when your house is on fire. That is very understandable to me. Advocacy, and this is just from what I think. Again, this is not my expertise. I want that to be so crystal clear. This is not my expertise. I can only speak from my life experience. I want that to be so clear. But advocacy is work. It is labor. And again, if your house is burning, I see why that's difficult. I see why it is more difficult to expend energy towards other movements. When the media is run rampant with the erasure of your people, the blacklisting of anyone who dares to support them, when it feels like everywhere you look, people are trying to, people have to argue as to why you should exist, why you should be allowed to do XYZ, why you should be seen. I'm a Haitian person. That's a lot. It feels a lot. Again, I'm not trying to say that these experiences are the same. I'm just trying to express a feeling through my personal experiences. Sorry, I do have to disclaimer everything I say, because somebody will misunderstand me on purpose. But as someone who grew up never hearing a single good word about my people from where I grew up in the U.S., I was born in the U.S., but literally by chance. I would have been born in Haiti, but I was born early and I wouldn't have the NICUs where. Anyways, that's not part of the story. But yeah, as someone who grew up never hearing a good word about their people, hearing their people belligerently slandered by teachers, by the TV, by any time I heard something about Haiti or Haitian people, it was something negative, unless it was coming from my family, unless it was coming from Haitian people. I see that is back on the rise in our year of 2024, and I could not imagine that on top of my people being slaughtered in mass and then having to prove to people that they are in fact being slaughtered in mass. And that's what's happening to Palestinian people. All this to say, I actually don't know what I'm meaning to say. I just think if we can, we should act with a little more grace towards each other. If you got it in you, hey, if you don't, maybe keep it to yourself. Maybe keep it to yourself if you don't. I don't know. If you want to crash out, maybe let's keep it in the drafts. We don't need you to come on the internet and tell black people you don't care about them. We don't need you to come on the internet and tell Palestinian people you don't care about them. There's enough people that do that. And whatever you hear people say, please question it. Even if it's someone you normally agree with, sometimes they're going to be wrong. Sometimes I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing. With that being said, I assume that this video won't do well because I'm talking about Palestine, as goes most things when I talk about Palestine. But I am currently working on kind of like making a document where I'm able to put all the GoFundMes of any families who have reached out to me. I'm trying to include like pictures and short bios because you can only put like one link in your TikTok, like, you know, like in the space for a link, girl. I don't know what it's called. So before I was only able to put one GoFundMe in there at a time. So I'm trying to make a document so that then people can just like go through and read and pick somebody to donate to if you've got a few spare dollars. I would go the creator fund route, but I got kicked off of it for too many violations, whatever that means. I understand that disposable income is hard to come by. I totally understand that, especially for the age range that my audience is. So if you can share it as well when I post that, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I don't think you should give up on people that could easily be you. And even if they couldn't easily be you, let's all just, hey, we gotta link arms and do this together, crew. Like, I don't know much more about what we should do beyond that, and you shouldn't ask me. I always think about this, actually, frequently, when I was like, people would ask me, like, oddly, like, serious political questions when I was, like, 17 years old. Why are you asking a 17-year-old this question? I would answer for some inexplicable reason. And low-key, sometimes answers were kind of based. And like, even now I'm 22, I don't know what to do, girl. I don't have a developed frontal lobe. I'm an intelligent person, but I'm still 22. I am just trying to navigate what I am given and hoping I can help somebody along the way. And I understand that other people have that sentiment. And it's hard to figure out what to do. But let's not crash out on each other, maybe. Why someone say, Ariel, what did you think about the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight? I believe that I have gravely misstepped in this life for someone to even utter that phrase to me, because for you to believe that that is something that I would even remotely care about, I have done something wrong. Like something we've gone wrong somewhere. Okay, so yesterday I saw Wicked, so here's my thoughts as someone who's never seen the musical, and I tried my best to avoid any plot spoilers, etc. Before I start though, I need the theater goers to come to the front. Because I was watching the movie and I was like, something gay is happening, right? Like, is there meant to be something gay occurring? Because am I crazy? But for other people who watched, like, you also thought something gay happened, right? There were multiple instances where I was like, this is potentially the most homoerotic friendship I've ever seen. What do you mean she got you a silly little hat that was meant to be ugly, but now you wear the silly little hat for the rest of your life? Oh, okay. Spoiler alert for Wicked, obviously, but like the scene with the two of them dancing, I was like, am I not meant to believe? Is this not meant to tell me that these two people are in love? Like, but at the same time, I also believe Elphaba and Fiyero are in love. I also believe that, even though it was quite everyone just had chemistry for no reason. I don't know. Perhaps there's a disaster bisexual situation going on. I'm not sure. Moving on. Oh, they can sing. They could sing down, and I knew they could, and I knew that. But I wasn't prepared, I don't think, for the level of singing down that was going to occur. This was like the first time I've really seen Cynthia Erivo in something. I'm aware that she is very much in the musical theater space. I'm just not as much in that space. Therefore, I'm not as familiar with all those people. I enjoy the space as more of a casual watcher occasionally. If someone had made slime of the if someone made slime of the show, perhaps I've seen it. Anyways, oh my god, every time she opened her mouth to sing, I was like, if I sounded like that, I would sing everything. I wouldn't speak ever again. Ariana Grande is a great singer, we know, but she's also deeply hilarious in this movie. I found her deeply hilarious. I was also potentially more elevated than my regular level of elevation, perhaps. I was actually giggling. I knew she had good comedic timing, because if you remember, Kat Valentine was funny as shit. Kat Valentine was hilarious, especially like right before they made her whole personality just dumb. They're like, what's Kat about? And they're like, I don't know, dumb. Like, she was still very funny when they allowed her to have thoughts. Jonathan Bailey is a great leading man. He has so much charisma. I thought it was great. Defying Gravity, gagged. gagged. Like, I enjoy all the changes that they got to make with the original music, because in the live show, like when it's actually on Broadway, they're not allowed to do that, or they fine them, which I feel like is crazy work. Mostly because I don't know, like, to me, the theater, the part that makes theater is that it's live, and like you can do, it's existing as like a living, breathing entity, because this performance will never be the same as the next performance, regardless if you have the same exact cast, it's the same words, it's the same songs, but not necessarily the exact same thing is going to happen every time. The actors are maybe not going to make the same exact choice every single time. I think it's crazy that they get fined for like riffs and stuff, when I think that can add so much color to like the song and make it like, oh, it's this person's version of the character. Does that make sense? So I think there's a lot of note changes throughout the movie, and I thought they were all great. Popular key change, gagged at 8, sorry. The dance scenes in this, sorry, what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy. The dance scenes filled me with a childlike joy and wonder that I have not experienced since the High School Musical movies. And you're like, are you comparing Wicked High School Musical? Yes, because Kenny Ortega it's Kenny Ortega. It's Kenny Ortega. If you said Ariel, who do you think is one of the greatest directors of our time? He's on my list, and I'm not being funny, I'm being dead ass. He's fantastic. And those dance numbers are great, and you remember all of them. Get your head in the game. Work this out. The senior prom one, what's it called? The Night of Nights Tonight. That's not what the song is called. It had like that kind of cohesion to me. All the dance numbers, I thought they were very nice and extravagant. This is my one thing, and this is the thing that everybody said, it looked a little weird. The lighting, why is the lighting like that? I know we can't do Technicolor anymore, but we can't bump up the saturation like a little bit. You could have sent it to me, and I could have recolored it in Sony Vegas Pro. I could have put a coloring on it in After Effects, and I feel like that is what the movie is missing. Because I don't like that visually, I don't know how to make this sense. The set does not look of this world, but when I look at it, I'm like, this is of this world. Like, I feel like Oz is meant to look more mystical, and just the color grading and the lighting choices, sometimes I'm like, ugh, why did they choose that? Like it's like the end of like Dancing Through Life, and then it's like Glinda and Fiyero kiss, and it's that like, the fucking backlighting, don't piss me off. Why did you backlight? Don't piss me off. And even that, actually, I don't know if a coloring would have fixed that. I don't know if a coloring would have fixed that lighting choice. But maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it's the grading. Something about it is off. It is, the people do yearn for Technicolor. I am one of the people. And I don't yearn for Technicolor all the time, but time and place. Oz is the time and also the place. Like, okay, is that all I have to say? I think. I'm sure there's many a thing that I forgot. I will probably come back to speak later, but you know.
I'm not asking this as a judgment. I'm asking out of genuine curiosity. How frequently are y'all seeing kids misbehave in public and parents not doing anything about it? Like, never mind that every single time my baby so much as cries, I feel such deep-rooted, like, mom embarrassment that I want to go hide in a hole. How many kids are y'all seeing in a day? And in relation, how many of those kids are misbehaving? And how many of those kids that are misbehaving are having parents that are just letting them do it? I see this comment all the time talking about parents who don't parent, parents who let their kids do anything and run buck wild and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, where do y'all work where you keep seeing this? Are you working in a school? Because otherwise, and I mean this personally, I just don't see that many kids in a day, and I have one. Like the last time I saw a parent let their kid run around and not do anything about it, I was at the pediatrician. Do y'all frequent the pediatrician's office? And even she, bless her heart, was exhausted. Like her boy was just, an enthusiastic, happy to be here, high energy kid. So she kind of stuck him in this little corner where there were no other people and let him just run. I mean, he literally bumped clean into me on my way out with my daughter. And she was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, dude, it's literally fine. And that's the last time I've seen a child genuinely misbehave in public in months. Now at school, sure, it's different because kids get rowdy there. My mom teaches kindergarten. I get it. If you're like just a member of the general public, I need to know just how many of these kids y'all are running up on, because you talk about it like it's a frequent problem. And I just need to know, like, where are these parents that are genuinely not parenting their kids on such a regular basis that you've formed a deep-rooted opinion on it? It's a genuine ask. Where are these people at? So if nothing else, I can avoid them. Because so far I'm doing a great job and I don't want to find them. In this context, I mean people under the age of 18 are a marginalized group of people. In fact, they are one of the largest marginalized groups in the world. In In fact, according to United Nations Global Compact, they are some of the most vulnerable members of society and are rarely consulted about how communities make decisions affecting them directly. Children are often taken advantage of because of their position in society. They have virtually no say in anything that happens to them, around them, pertaining them. Y'all want to act like children just simply aren't there, and it does impact them. Because they don't hold any positions of power, they're often taken advantage of financially, emotionally, mentally, physically. Because of where they are developmentally, they are incredibly vulnerable and make up some of the highest rates of physical and intimate abuse in the world. And y'all continuously look down on them and look for new ways to exclude them. Y'all insist they shouldn't be allowed in public unless they behave the way you want them to. Y'all call them names. You talk about how awful they are and how annoying they are in public. Y'all do things that you simply cannot get away with doing for anybody else. Because by being an adult alone, you generally hold some type of power. You are seen as a member of society and then treated accordingly. When you're not, people get upset. But y'all don't do that for kids, and it's because they're marginalized. And the fact that you think they're not marginalized speaks to just how bad their marginalization is.
There's been discussion about how the conservative shift in politics is being reflected in social media's algorithms. And I have to believe that that is why my For You page is so rancid right now. Rancid in the sense that even some of the creators whose perspectives that I generally respect are coming off very, I'm trying to find a nice word, conservative. The policing of immodest women is an example of this. You think booty cheeks are inappropriate for homecoming? Fine, I personally don't care. Poster girl dresses are worker wear, so they are impractical for the daytime, and many young women do take cues from sex workers without understanding what comes with that lifestyle. Fine, I agree. But why were y'all throwing around terms like hypersexual? Something that is a medical condition that y'all were diagnosing people with based on clothing. Why did y'all go full red pill by saying that these women should not be surprised if they're harassed or assaulted in this attire? Meanwhile, there is no actual correlation between sexual violence and clothing. Men have just programmed y'all to believe that so that you blame women for their behavior. That's feminism 101. I thought we all got that. Why are people spreading myths about HIV and AIDS like it's the fucking 80s? Ronald Reagan ass motherfuckers talking about they shouldn't be allowed in tattoo shops and that PrEP commercials are bad because they encourage people to sleep with infected people. Somebody actually said that. Why is it cool to now openly mock disabled people under the guise of faux adoration? I love Shay and Bria. The way that y'all are demonizing radicals to cape for politicians before election day. Ew. Mocking genocide victims and posting the number to ICE as a joke in response to Kamala losing. Ew. Using identity politics as a pejorative when you don't even know where that term originated from, similar to how conservatives do woke. Ew. Implying that trans women are not allowed to be upset at being misgendered if they don't look feminine enough. Ew. Repackaging gender roles and sprinkling on spirituality, talking about dark, divine, feminine energy. Ew, ew, ew. And now this just in, y'all are about to pretend not to understand why a woman saying not only that she likes to be thin, which is her right, but that sometimes it's all she thinks about, to her comment section that's full of the most scary comments about women and their pursuit of thinness. Now we're about to pretend like we don't see why that's a fucking problem. I can't stand y'all.
Look, y'all, I'm about to start posting on here like the men who hold up the romance books and start thirst trapping. Give me 1 second. Some books that must strictly be read when the sky is gray. Either the sun is setting at 3 o'clock like it is right now, or it's been gloomy for the entire day. If you pick these up when the sun is out, the vibes are going to be off. You just have to know when it's the right time. One, we have a YA beloved of mine, A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is a gothic dark academia fantasy novel that I always recommend to people as a good book to get them back into fantasy or get them into fantasy, period. For lit fic, we have Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I would recommend this to anybody who likes Sally Rooney. Another fantasy dark academia set on a college campus. We have 9000 by Leigh Bardugo. This is one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read. If you have negative things to say about this book, I need to be honest with you. I don't want to hear them. I don't. It's not open forum here. Get out. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. These are also gothic fantasy. A Study in Drowning is like the more digestible young adult version of these. They're obviously very different, but if you like one, you'll probably like the other. Because in both stories, we have an FMC who everyone thinks is slowly losing their minds. Next. Cautious Traveler's Guide to the Wastelands by Sarah Brooks. This is an adventure mystery fantasy novel. A little bit of a slower read, but for lovers of paranormal Berenice or The Midnight Library. So if you like those two books, you'll probably like this one too. The love of my life, my icon, V.E. Schwab. She does not write a bad book. In my world, in my worldview, she does not write a bad book. We have both Vicious and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Very different books, but both equally good. V.E. Schwab knows how to write a fantasy book. She does. Normal People by Sally Rooney. I honestly, I can't even imagine pulling this book out when the sun is out. You can't do that. I haven't smiled since I read this book. Lastly, we have Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. Now, The Familiar was not a favorite of mine this year, okay? And that upsets me because y'all know I rock with Leigh Bardugo for real. Like, me and her go together like this. I 100% could see myself liking this book if I read it at the right time. I was kind of in a reading slump when I read it, so let me not be too harsh of a critic. This is not meant to be read when the vibes outside are happy and fluffy and gorgeous. I like having an excuse to get into my bed early, but I don't like this 3 p.m. sunsetting vibe. I thought I did, but I don't. I thought I did, but I don't. I'm seeing the Hunger Games accounts trying to say 2 years from today, Sunrise on the Reaping will hit theaters. Why are you telling me 2 years in advance? First of all, the book comes out in March. Let's talk about that. Second of all, 2 years? Why you remind me? Why would you remind me about that? I thought it was sooner. Why are you getting online and reminding me it's 2 years away? What do you think that's gonna do for me? Please don't piss me off. Please don't.
Media literacy is dead. Media literacy is dead. Except 9 times out of 10, y'all aren't even referring to media literacy because that definition has been blown to hell and back since it entered the public lexicon. You're referring to reading comprehension, aka actual illiteracy. 21% of the United States population is functionally illiterate. That is 43 million people, the bulk of which speak English as their first language and were born within the country. This number should terrify you because functional illiteracy is just as frightening as regular illiteracy. I don't think people realize how insanely high that number is. That's high enough that you likely know multiple people within your own community that fall under that criteria. That's basically 1 in 5 US adults that if I were to hand them a sheet of paper and ask them to read it back to me and explain what the words on the sheet meant, couldn't do it. And it's a problem only projected to get worse and that has extremely few resources to correct. And there's so much shame surrounding adult illiteracy because we treat illiteracy as the product of personal failure over systemic. If you are a grown adult and you cannot read, that is not your fault. That is the product of chronic and unacceptable neglect. But unfortunately, it is your responsibility to attempt to sort out. So, what can we do about it? Well, that would require massive systemic overhaul that's unlikely to happen within the span of the next decade, so let's use the resources that we have available to us. Here's a handful of YouTube channels that teach phonics for free, but I'll also be doing my own part. But on my end, my mother and aunties are English teachers by trade, so I'll be giving mini lessons on here and on YouTube. How to better engage with the content you consume and engage with it on a more abstract level. I have a handful of lessons in mind at the moment, but comment below what you would like to see. Honestly, obsessive-compulsive disorder is an incredible example of the fact that logic does not impact belief in the way the majority of people think it does, because I personally know my obsessions have no basis in reality. I can tell you their exact date of origin. I can tell you why I perform the compulsions I perform. That doesn't eliminate the urge to do them. Obviously, I can't speak for everybody with the disorder, but the bulk of people I've met seem to share a similar understanding. They know their ceiling isn't going to come crashing in because they flipped a light switch an odd number of times. They know their car isn't going to crash because they settled in incorrectly. But does this do anything to eliminate the extreme soul-crushing terror that comes coursing through your body whenever you fail to perform a ritual you rely on correctly? No! And to me, this is the most frustrating part about recovery because for decades, the common public consensus has been that if you understand why you exhibit the symptoms of mental illness that you do, you'll therefore be able to eliminate those symptoms. I see the logic, and understanding does help, but understanding in of itself is not enough to yield tangible progress for many people. And I think what I find most frustrating about this already frustrating process is that understanding is often heralded as the end-all be-all, when in reality it should just be the first step. And I so wish there were a larger focus on coping mechanisms or how to internally de-escalate, because I understand how my anxiety impacts the disorder. I understand I am illogical. That does nothing to eliminate my distress. What I wish more parents understood about pink tote moments is that your child views you as the reference point for how they should engage with the world and respond to the problems they encounter within it. So whenever you respond to a minor inconvenience that can be corrected in literally 10 minutes or less with screaming and crying and gnashing of teeth, what you communicate to your child is that these minor inconveniences are Category 5 crises that mandate an extreme and emotionally distressing response. When you teach your child these minor 10-minute inconveniences, like them dropping and shattering a glass, or the dog urinating inside the house, or them forgetting to take out the trash, are on par with dangerous and devastating circumstances, you create a future adult that cannot and will not be able to emotionally regulate, that will likely be just as emotionally volatile as you are, and will have a lifetime of problems associated with these qualities. We've all lost our mind over minor inconveniences. It's human, but your baby is brand new here and does not deserve to have a quality this negative instilled into them. So, When you feel the rage coming on, do everything to remove yourself. Take a deep breath, run to your bedroom and scream into your pillow, but come back and then appropriately address the situation. And it's difficult because the bulk of people that do this were raised with identical childhoods and see nothing wrong with this behavior. And this isn't speaking a curse upon you if you grew up in a pink tote household, but statistically speaking, you're likely to emulate that behavior yourself when you have children. So what do? We take ourselves out of the situation. We take a deep breath. We run to our room and scream into our pillow and come back and then appropriately address it. Your 7-year-old broke and shattered a dish? Run and grab your shoes. I'll teach you how to sweep it up. Your 10-year-old's puppy they spent years begging for pissed inside the house? Come downstairs. Time to clean up the mess of your baby. Your 13-year-old forgot to take out the trash after you told them like 10 times to do it? Hey, get over here and do it. That's all there is to it. Also, fun hack. As a child, whenever I would fall, and I had obviously not hurt myself, my mother would clap her hands and go, yay! Because she knew I was looking for her to see her response, and that if she panicked, I would start screaming and crying. But if she laughed and clapped her hands, I would laugh, get up, and continue playing like nothing happened. How do I ensure my child doesn't wind up functionally illiterate? Read to them. Run down to the library, stock up on children's books, read to them. It doesn't matter if they popped out 2.5 weeks ago or don't speak English yet. Read to them. It sounds like a huge oversimplification, but I cannot stress enough to y'all how big a difference this step makes. Part of this issue is systemic. Both parents, generally speaking, have to work to sustain themselves and their children in this economy and entrust the care of their children to workers that are just as overworked and understaffed as they are. But that makes the little time you do have with your children so much more precious. And if you do choose to engage in this activity, please don't pick up a book and drone on 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Your child will pick up on your resentment and animosity and not want to engage in the activity. Have fun with it. Do silly voices. As your child actually starts to develop a foundation in reading, you can even poke fun at the story, make up things that aren't there, and they'll go, silly mom and dad, that's not there. They'll get a kick out of it. You don't have children yourself? Do this with your younger siblings, your nieces and nephews, your friends' children. If you have the opportunity to make reading a fun and exciting activity for a child, seize it. The reason that we are witnessing so many young people grow up into illiterate adults is because of the way they're taught and the fact there's simply not enough people to teach them. So that one-on-one time is crucial. And to be totally candid, as somebody that was born into a family where quite literally every woman became a teacher, a big aspect as to why you're seeing the problems in the education system you are is because children are entering it with no foundational knowledge, no ABCs, no 1, 2, 3s, no colors, no days of the week. You're lucky in many instances if these children are even potty trained because parents are ascribing the education system the bulk of their children's learning, or to more appropriately rephrase, the entirety of their children's learning. Take advantage of the time that you have and read to them whenever you can. It will improve their vocabulary. It'll create fond memories. My best memories as a child are of my mother reading to me. And it'll improve your relationship. You'll be grateful you did it. You all were formally warned months ago, but it bears worth repeating that The Wicked novel is not the gift to grant your 12-year-old Broadway-loving niece or nephew unless you want an exceptionally angry phone call from their parents post-Christmas. But what exactly in the book is so adult? First off, there's the matter of Elphaba's conception, which isn't consensual so much as it is coerced, with her mother being drugged by a man that gives her a green serum that is heavily insinuated to be the reason that Elphaba has green skin. As Elphaba's parents are unsuccessfully attempting to navigate the struggle of having a child with shark teeth sharp enough to bite off a midwife's finger, they form a throuple with a man named Turtleheart. Turtleheart is then ritualistically sacrificed to end a drought, and both Elphaba's parents are so overcome with guilt they become missionaries in his homeland. And this all happens before we ever wind up getting to Shiz. At Shiz, Dr. Dillamond is straight up murdered, and to add insult to injury, he is butchered like livestock. At Shiz, Elphaba's classmate attends a club and is heavily insinuated to be drugged and assaulted by a sentient tiger. Later on, he contracts an incurable disease that is heavily insinuated to be the result of this encounter with said tiger, and then dies having never recovered from the trauma of the original encounter. And we haven't even gotten to the parts where Elphaba becomes a by-the-books literal domestic terrorist. To summarize, the book is unafraid to show the depravity the world it exists within is capable of. And yet, although the way it accomplishes this is flawed, it's unafraid to show oppression in its most violent form. Now, I am saying all this as a person that read this book for the first time when they were 14 because it was in their middle school library, and to be totally fair, the writing style was so convoluted to me at the time that I didn't get half of this. The brunt of its most infamous scenes don't go into explicit detail, but that being said, this may be a book you want to hold off on for a while, especially if the child is still in elementary school or close to elementary age.